Final ending of the rotation, part 1 down below. Brad threw Maddie out onto the street, but there was a pinewood road barrier, 3 treated, greenish-colored pieces of wood, between her and the roadway where students sit to observe the passing scenery. I twisted and launched myself, using every ounce of strength, to catch my daughter in the slow-motion world I was living in. My ankle twisted as I pushed off, but I gained speed. Maddie appeared to be in total distress, her body being flung around in Brad's arms like a rag doll. I grabbed her almost totally, and I mean it, I was able to grab her out of the air just in time to see the two of us collide with the barrier. I wasn't quite successful, though. My capture still hadn't fully covered Maddie's shoulder. Due to our location, Maddie's right arm, my back, and my left arm all snagged on the pine bar across the top of the barrier at the same moment. We continued to fall into the side of a Toyota Land Cruiser as the combined velocity was too great, causing the barrier to break completely. I lost consciousness. I was informed afterwards that I was unconscious for approximately 30 seconds, during which time I noticed a small gathering of individuals. Maddie was screaming in agony and clinging to me for dear life as my arm was clamped around her. If she wasn't screaming, she would be sobbing daddy nonstop for the next 5 minutes. Brad had vanished from view. Fighting through the pain in my arm and back, I gently sat up and asked for my phone and keys that were on the table in front of me. One of the audience members told me they had phoned 0 emergency, and that both police and an ambulance were on their way. An elderly man gave me a dejected look. I apologize, son, but after you brought your young girl here, that guy. After about 10 seconds of motionless standing, he turned, took your phone and keys, and bolted. I nodded and swallowed, feeling a throbbing agony in my arm and a throbbing ache in my temples from someone pressing a towel against my head. I asked the man, would you be able to get my daughter's bag? He nodded as he turned to face a younger man. The younger man, who seemed about my age, returned a bit later with Maddie's suitcase. I got in there and took Maddie's phone out. She was given an iPhone by me for her birthday this year, which was completely locked down but yet allowed her to phone Shona or me at any moment. I gave Shona a call. The third ring was heard by her. She spoke with a smile, well, hello beautiful, are you having a good swim with your dad? I sighed as another sharp ache shot through my back. Shona. Tim. Shona noticed that I was upset and using Maddie's phone, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck prickle. When I said, we've been hurt, Shona. Maddie is with me and is being so brave right now. Maddie glanced up at me, her face masking discomfort and her eyes red. In the distance, I could hear sirens getting louder and louder. I need you to call Nadine and ask her to trace my phone because I'm running out of time and we're both in a lot of agony. The police and ambulance are on their way. My executive assistant was named Nadine. Tim, what happened? Is Maddie okay? I could sense the grief in her voice, the pain a powerless mother feels for her kid. I tried not to cry as my daughter started crying again, but I forced a smile and said, she's here with me now. She's being the bravest girl I have ever met. It was Brad Houghton. He assaulted me then tried to throw Maddie out of the way when she stepped in the middle between us when I was down. Both of us had injuries. Could you please go to the hospital? I need you there for Maddie, but I'm not sure if they will allow us to stay together. As soon as her car's Bluetooth picked up the call, I could already hear Shona say, I'm on my way, as she backed out of the driveway. My daughter nodded and groaned again as I tried not to move her. Mummy is on her way to meet us at the hospital, sweetie, I informed her. An ambulance showed up, and 2 medics got out. One walked straight to us while the other proceeded to get a gurney out the back of their car. How are you doing, Tim? During the call, Shona said, I'm not sure, Shona. My current priority is Maddie. The ambulance is on its way, and I'll see you at the hospital shortly. I apologize, but I have to leave right now. Could you maybe ask Nadine to look for Brad? He probably stole my car because he has my keys and phone. All right, Tim, I'm on it. Look after our girl, please. I answered, I will, and hung up. The ambulance crew suspected my daughter had a fractured arm and praised me for being able to get in the way. If she had hit the pine barrier without me in the way, it would have been much worse for her. For the next 5 minutes, they checked Maddie and then brought the gurney over and started checking me. Hopefully, they could get both of us in the same ambulance. They got Maddie onto the gurney and assisted me in sitting on the ambulance's edge. In addition to my suspected broken arm, they were fairly certain that at least 3 of my ribs were fractured. They examined my head and suspected that I might have suffered a concussion because of how witnesses and I had described the altercation. As the paramedics loaded us up and drove Maddie and me to the local hospital's emergency room, the police arrived and I was able to provide some basic information. After we got to the emergency room, I sighed with relief as Shona went straight to Maddie and gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. A few minutes later, a doctor took us both for x-rays. Once we were in the emergency room, we were both examined by doctors in the same emergency bay, and Maddie wouldn't let go of me. After determining that Maddie had a small fracture to her right arm, they gave her some pediatric-grade painkillers and started wrapping her limb. Me, I was in much worse shape. An x-ray confirmed that I had 5 fractured ribs and a broken arm, and that the collision with the barrier had caused some very bad bruising on my back that would probably show up for several days. They had also placed some special clips over the gash on my forehead and given me some pretty strong pain medication. After that, Shona was staring at me and, as usual, understood what I was thinking as I lay down on the hospital bed and smiled across at Maddie, thinking that I would bear 1,000 times worse for her if it kept her safe. She said, "Thank you," with tears in her eyes. I said, trying to settle into a comfortable position by reclining. "You know I'd give my life for both of you." When I opened my eyes, I saw Shona standing over me with tears in her eyes. "I love you too, Tim," she murmured, and I smiled. A second later, I felt a very gentle kiss on my lips. I winced and began coughing up blood. The last thing I remember for 3 days was Shona screaming as I felt myself start to lose consciousness and a fresh agony start to grow in my side. I was in a much nicer hospital room when I woke up, and Rick was there and heard me stir. "Hey, friend, how are you doing?" As he examined me with concern, he murmured, "Like, what the heck happened? Is Maddie doing well?" I inquired. "She's fine. She got her cast on and she'll be back at school next week," Rick said with a smile. "After her heroic father, she will be the most popular person in school." Rick saw me grimace as I attempted to chuckle and felt a stinging pain in my side once more. "Here, the nurse told me that if you're sore when you wake up, this is a morphine button. Only use it when you need it. If you can bear it, don't use it." I attempted to smile but couldn't. "What happened?" "Nothing too bad. The doctors told us that one of your ribs ended up bending a little too far with the fracture and poked one of your lungs." Rick attempted a grin as well, but then his expression turned sorrowful. "You're going to be okay, you just had a minor procedure." Rick moved aside to make room for a nurse and doctor to enter the room, and a moment later they were there, checking me out, telling me I was mending well, adjusting my medication, and leaving Rick and me to continue our conversation. "Any updates on Brad's situation?" I inquired. Rick took out his phone while grinning and perched on the side of my bed. "This is from the night you and Maddie were brought in. Update. It was a coincidence that he happened to run into Maddie and me that day, and with Bridget's words echoing in his head, he took the initiative. I spent a little more than a week in the hospital before they sent me home. The police questioned me and then went on to arrest Bridget as well. Apparently, she was noted as an accessory. Brad had explained during his interview, without a lawyer, idiot, that Bridget had expressed the desire to see me beaten to a pulp for throwing her out and evicting Brad. The case was quite straightforward. Brad was found guilty on several counts of assault. The judge also granted our divorce on the spot, ruling that I should not be tied down to a shrew like my second ex-wife. To everyone's surprise, I promised to give Bridget $10,000 to help her start over, provided she did so somewhere other than Byron Bay. Nadine worked with me at the house every day while I was recovering, and Shona was usually around too. Now, before you assume that Nadine and I ended up together, let me clarify that Nadine was my executive assistant. You know, the old adage, you don't crap where you eat, and that she was married, which was not something a young man in his 30s needed. Because Shona was always here, it made sense that Maddie was staying with me almost full-time. However, as we worked, I came up with a new campaign after seeing Maddie in her now heavily signed cast one afternoon when she got home from school. Maddie was now extremely protective of me. If anyone looked like they were going to disagree with me, including her mother, Maddie was in their faces giving them a severe chewing. One afternoon, after seeing Maddie's cast, I decided we would run a promotion in 3 of our most popular games. For every pack over $10 bought in-game, we would donate $1 to global charities that address domestic child abuse. Initially, my finance department was upset because, after costs, that dollar amounted to a little over 30% of our profits. But after the first month, they were thrilled to see the revenue coming in, marketing got involved, and Carly Evans followed up, which resulted in a rise of our in-game purchases by over 300%. Ultimately, we gave nearly $500,000 to 3 distinct charities in Australia, Poland, and South America. As a result, we now annually run a charity campaign that distributes money to those in need. I had a great time that summer, though I was a little lonely because I missed having someone by my side. Even though Shona was always there for me, she knew I needed a romantic companion. The months passed, and Maddie and I recovered. Once the casts were off and my ribs healed, it was midsummer and Maddie and I were back at the beach. Well, we were now followed by Shona and Greg and often Rick when he could. Once Greg was walking on his own. Shona and I had discussed as the summer went on that I wanted to go back out and date, but I just wasn't into it. The few dates I went on didn't work out. Either there wasn't chemistry, or they were intimidated by my background, or worse, they were just plain old gold diggers like Bridget. I wish I could find someone who shared that connection with me, like Shona, since I was only 31 and had plenty of time on my hands. After a year, I had a few brief but acerbic conversations with Bridget, most of which ended with me telling her no. She would ask for money, a reconciliation, or, worse, my forgiveness, and each time I would respond negatively and stop the call. My life was about to change again, but not in the way I had anticipated, but that was something I was unaware. My birthday was coming up, and the office, Shona, and Nadine organized a birthday celebration for me at my house. I had stayed there after the divorce because it was a really beautiful house, and I had invested a lot of money in it, so I thought I would enjoy it. There were more than 100 people there that night. I think I knew maybe half of them. There were people from work, some local business people I worked with. Carly Evans was there, but she was told she had to be off the record. My family was there, along with Shona's parents and a few members of Rick's family. There was food and drink for everyone. Music played, and as the evening wore on, I felt a nice buzz coming on. Just as I was seeing Maddie run by smiling with one of my cousin's children, I knocked into someone by mistake and apologized quietly. "I apologize, that's all you have to say." A voice called out to me. I pivoted to face the voice that wasn't quite shrieking. "Will you please pardon me?" I inquired with the woman in front of me. "You heard me," she replied. "A simple sorry is just plain rude. You could have knocked me into the pool." The woman in front of me was both strikingly beautiful and repulsive in the same breath. She was fairly tall. I was 6 feet 2, but with curves that showed off in the floral jumpsuit she was wearing. Her pale skin and freckles around her nose emphasized her sapphire blue eyes. But what really caught my attention was her red hair. It was long and held in a braid that almost reached her waist. It had the crimson color of a smoldering fire that you could watch contentedly all night until the coals glowed hot and you were satisfied to say nothing as you felt the heat off them. The woman was clearly going to leave the group so she could smoke, but at the same time, she repelled me. To me, you can take the most beautiful woman in the world, whom every man, woman, and child on the planet agrees is the perfect human specimen, and put a cigarette in her hand, and I'm turned off. That's exactly what happened to me as soon as I saw the smoke in her hands. "Stop staring at me and tell me where can I go to get away from the crowd," the woman added, drawing me back to the realization that she was speaking to me. You can't." I then said, "There are no smoking areas here. If you want to smoke that cancer stick, then you need to go out to the street." Her tone was disdainful, as if it were improper that she was prohibited from smoking, as she snorted. "Really, the guy that owns this place is that stuck up?" "He is," I said, approaching the woman. "I'm sure he won't mind if I have just one where no one is around." "Maybe over there," she said, glancing over the fence to the empty side of the pool. Shaking my head, I said, "No ma'am, I don't think that's a wise idea. It's no smoking in here, and there are kids around." I turned to face the corner she was referring to. She appeared a little irate, but she also began to put the cigarette away when children were brought up. That's when Maddie arrived, little Greg in tow, along with a buddy. Maddie firmly exclaimed, "Daddy said you can't smoke, lady, that means no smoking." With a puzzled gaze, the woman asked me, "This man is your father?" Hands on her hips, the woman retreated slightly as Maddie, her companion, and now Greg all made the daring gesture of placing their hands on their hips. With a hint of sarcasm in her voice, Maddie said, "And everyone does what my dad says. If he says no smoking, then there is no smoking." I reasoned that I should intervene before Maddie became too agitated. She still took shots at whomever she believed was aiming at me, even after all this time. Shona and I started her with a therapist around a year ago. She and I had fought a couple of times over me. My daughter seemed to want to protect me from everyone after that day, possibly because she thought that if I got harmed again, Brad would kill me. I moved forward to face the 3 kids, but Greg mistook my step for one intended to address the woman in front of us. Now that he was 3, he was fairly gregarious and was learning how to throw his weight around because he had an older sister. He moved forward and gave the woman a gentle prod as I turned. We failed to consider the fact that, when we were all standing along the pool's edge, the woman had stepped onto the coping and was balancing on what appeared to be 3-inch heels during our brief interaction. And after a slight shove from Greg, she lost her equilibrium and was on the verge of falling in. As it was all happening, I realized and tried to steady her, but it was too late. Her eyes widened in utter dread, and she grabbed hold of my hand, dragging the 2 of us into the pool with a loud splash. As this was my birthday celebration, I expected to be thrown in at some time. After all, I was no stranger to pool hijinks. However, this woman, whoever she was, did not. I laughed when I surfaced. While spluttering and screaming like a banshee, she surfaced. "How dare you, you little," she said, pausing when she noticed Greg, a 3-year-old boy. "You can't be angry with a child like that." Rather, her frown deepened as she laughed and turned to face me. She chastised me, saying, "And you, how can you laugh? This is not a laughing matter." "Of course it is," I replied, trying not to chuckle too much. "We fell in the pool, classic slapstick. What's not to laugh about? If you don't laugh, you'll cry, so get over it, Karen." "Karen," she said, glancing at me before pausing to consider the children who were laughing along with many other people in the area. "Who the hell?" she asked. With the cigarette she had intended to smoke earlier floating to the surface between us, she asked, "Who's Karen?" I smiled at the woman as I saw the tiny air bubble form on the surface and pop a moment later. I couldn't resist giving her another jab after noticing how close she was to making the pool's water turn to steam. "Sorry, I don't know your name, but with your stormy disposition, the demand for a space to smoke and that look telling me you want to speak to the manager, I just thought you might be Karen." I imagined for a second that I might have gone a bit too far when I watched as her face turned bright red. I could see the pool shrink an inch as the water drained to contain the heat the enraged woman was now emanating. She stopped, frowning angrily at me when she realized what I had just said. For your information, mister, I am not a Karen, and I just wanted a place to smoke out of the way so I wouldn't bother anyone. I am not a Karen, she continued with a smile. My name is Lily, said Rick as he walked over holding Shona and many towels. Rick nearly snarled as I swam to the pool's edge with the woman I now knew to be Lily, sadly, not Karen, and said, I might have known you'd be the trouble here. Most of the guests were still smiling as they resumed their chats after the spectacle of people, including the birthday boy, falling into the pool. Shona laughed when she saw me in the water as we exited the pool. Well, you're in a little earlier than I thought, but you got in. Happy birthday, waterboy, Shona laughed. I grabbed a towel and forced myself out of the water. After drying my hair, I turned to face Shona and gave her my best impersonation of a blue steel man. Merman, I murmured, giving 2 little coughs. Merman, I added again, flinging the towel over my shoulder and leaving like a manly model. Shona burst out laughing at the illusion, and as she kept laughing, I heard her say things like black lung and water is the essence of wetness. I swiftly spun around, created a stance, and said, watch me turn left. As I kept walking, I heard other people laughing as well. Seeing their mother giggle, Maddie and Greg followed in. Rick was giving Lily a towel while grinning. Who was that Rick? Lily questioned, her frown still visible as she started towel drying her hair. I had to pause a few times to have quick conversations and giggles with the guests. He was the most self-righteous, arrogant prick here. He wouldn't let me smoke, got him at it. Now everything is soaked. Rick was carrying Lily's suitcase while she wrapped a towel over herself. That dear cousin was our host, the birthday boy, Tim Other, Rick said. Lily inquired, her eyes widening as she turned to face me. You mean? As I was pretending to tumble into the pool with a few people, I noticed Lily's attention and grinned. Yes, Rick replied with a smile. Not again. As I opened the door and went inside to change, I heard Rick giggling. I talked to Maddie about getting in people's faces when she doesn't know the whole story, and later that night, I saw her go up to Lily and apologize. The rest of the evening went really well. After Lily showered, Shona took her inside to the bedroom that Rick and her used when they stayed at my place. Lily changed into some clothes that didn't fit her very well, but they would do while Lily's clothes were in the dryer. I saw Lily sit down with Rick and Shona later that evening as I was saying goodbye to Nadine, her husband, and a few of my staff. The kids were now in the lounge watching a movie, and the catering staff was starting to clear up. I got myself another Bundy and Coke and walked over to Lily, Rick, and Shona's place. So, Karen, I sat down next to her and asked, do you cater for events like this or are you limited to special occasions like birthdays? I am not Car. She paused, looked at herself, and grinned. Birthdays are only for haughty men whose children shove me into their swimming pools. That one's not mine, it's theirs. I pointed at Rick and Shona while laughing. Her expression was bewildered. But I thought they were yours. Maddie, the girl who came to defend my honor, is. But little Greg, he is Shona and Rick's. Oh, Lily said as she briefly glanced down at her hands. The inquiry dragged on. So you and Shona? Yes, Lily, Shona replied. Tim and I were married once, and Maddie is our daughter. Her face briefly lit up with wrath, but it was swiftly replaced with a profound melancholy. With a pleading tone that seemed like some type of pent-up agony she didn't know how to release, she looked at Shona and said, How do you? I mean, he's your ex and he's so up himself. How can you stand to be in the same room? Nobody said anything for a brief while, and I believe we all realized that this had swiftly escalated from a casual get-together to something really serious. Rick remarked, Guys, let me take this one, first turning to face Shona and then me. Both of us gave a nod. I think Lily needs to hear it from the outside perspective first. Rick took a minute to gather his thoughts before saying, by way of explanation, Lily here is my second cousin. She's visiting from Kingscliff. She's had a hard time these last few years, and the family thought it would be a good thing if she got away for a little while. She arrived this afternoon and I asked her to meet us here so she could meet a few people before spending the next fortnight with us. Unfortunately, she didn't get to meet Shona or the kids before they arrived, hence the confusion. I grinned, and that answered a lot of questions, but there was still something more. Lily, Rick went on, sounding almost like a parent giving a lecture. You could say that Tim and Shona are best friends. I learned years ago not to be jealous of that, and I trust both of them with my life. He gave me a tender grin before turning to face his wife, and I lifted my glass in appreciation. He breathed deeply. I have no idea how two people that were once married stay friends like they have. But before you think it, they have Maddie together and never once have either of them given me doubt or cause they are anything other than friends. Lily's mouth dropped, and she began glancing between Shona and me. Shona laughed. It's a little weird and out of the normal, I know. Most exes hate each other. But Tim and I were friends before we married and yes, it fell apart. But he's always been there for Maddie and I love him dearly. But it's more like a very close brother. We know now that we weren't supposed to be married. But right after my husband, Shona gazed lovingly at Rick for a split second. There is not a man I trust more in this world than Tim. I did nothing but sit and enjoy my drink. I had teased this woman a little, and I figured there was more to her past than I knew. That being said, it was not the appropriate time to interject. A couple of years ago, that business Rick was involved in, it was on the news. That was you, wasn't it? Lily asked, looking at me for a brief moment after having an epiphany. I lifted my glass and took a small sip while considering my response. When they realize what happened, the majority of folks either get starstruck or want to be my best buddy. I chose my words while glancing at Lily. Yes, that was me. It's why Maddie is very defensive of me. Both of us were hurt in the incident, myself quite badly in the process of saving her. Now anytime Maddie feels that someone is having a go at me, she jumps in and thinks she has to defend me. She is working through the fact that I got hurt saving her. Her brother is only 3 and thought he was being united with his sister when he pushed you. It all just went a little too far. I'm sorry about that. Lily nodded after giving me a curious look for a second but said nothing. I took another sip of my drink and replied, look, if you really want to smoke over in the corner, you're welcome to. At the time, with so many people out here, I just didn't want people to see that or the kids. Lily looked at me once more. It was unfortunate that she was a smoker and had such contempt for the outside world since she had the potential to be really gorgeous. I looked at Rick and he gently shook his head, story for another time. I know it's a bad habit I took up again recently after, she trailed off, a tear suddenly forming in her eye. Then she got up and walked away towards the corner. We were in the middle of a discussion about a Star Wars series, The Mandalorian, when Lily returned to the table. We weren't as geeky as I was, but Rick and Shona had watched a few shows with me over the years, and one of them was following Mando's adventures. I was trying to get Rick to see that Mando would have to fight several other Mandalorians in the future over the Darksaber, but he wasn't buying it. Lily said, this is the way, surprising us. It showed on our faces, and when I saw her smile for the first time, I realized that there was beauty beneath the exterior of a woman who was ready to burn the world down at the drop of a hat. This wasn't the first time I'd wondered what had scarred this woman so severely. I have spoken, I answered, quoting a different persona that a lot of my friends had also used. Rick and Shona both chuckled as I saw Lily try, with everything in her power, not to smile. She blushed, but they smiled, and I even got the impression that she relaxed. Are you a Star Wars fan? I questioned the slightly unstable woman. Lily said, more of a general sci-fi fan. I chose to ignore Shona's stare, without even bothering to glance at it. We all had more than a few drinks, so I put Shona and Rick in their usual room with little Greg, Maddie got her room, and Lily got the guest room. That night, as I went to sleep, I thought back to the vision of beauty that emerged from the pool in a white jumpsuit, leaving little to the imagination. Too bad that she smoked. Around midnight, the last guests left, leaving just the 4 of us and the kids passed out on the lounges inside. Over the next few days, we hung out at my house with Shona, Rick, and Lily by extension. We went to the beach, where we swam in the surf, built sandcastles, and ate fish and chips. Lily was a nice person, mostly, once you got past her attitude problem and her desire to smoke. After a few drinks, I blurted out, so what's your story, Lily? As we watched Shona with Maddie and Rick with Greg in the pool late one day, Lily frowned at me. It's not your concern, shot out the ferocious redhead. Sorry, I meant no offense, I said, raising my hands in surrender. I just wanted to inquire because you constantly saying that you need to smoke, what you never actually do. I positioned myself and said, you seem to be in the center of something. You know a little about my background, so you know I have been there. More than once. Lily sighed as she gave me a critical, angry look. She tried to get going. I said to the woman next to me, take your time. We have all afternoon and I think they're all too busy to notice us. She inhaled deeply as she made a resolution. Lily stated, I lost a baby, with sadness. Lily gazed down at me, then back down to the glass of red wine she was slowly drinking, and I wasn't sure what to say. The admission surprised me a little. It was roughly half a year ago, she said, attempting to clarify her recollection. I had been with my boyfriend for a little over 6 months, and I am not sure why, but I fell pregnant even though we were using protection. I nodded acknowledgingly, but said nothing when she looked at me. At first, I was a little worried. We were both so young in our relationship. But within less than a week I was happy at the idea. My boyfriend Aaron, he was less, she said. Lily took a deep breath, her eyes moistening. Anyway, we argued and yelled at each other, and once I started to show, Aaron started coming home later and drunk. One night he came home really drunk and I told him he needed to start being responsible. He was going to be a father. She looked at me once more, and this time I tried not to move in case it might interrupt her story. We argued and screamed at each other for almost 2 hours. He was drunk and I was pissed off. I needed him sober and helping me as our baby grew. Lily took a moment to gather her courage. Lily whispered to me, I've only ever told 2 people this next part. One is the police officer that interviewed me and the other in the surgeon that looked after me later. I don't know why, but I'm going to trust you, Mr. Other. I acknowledged with a tiny nod of my head. We didn't know at the time, however our neighbors had called the police. Our screaming match reported for a domestic disturbance. Both of us heard the sirens then, and in his drunk state he thought that I had called them and he pushed me down and then. Lily wasn't able to. She offered me a tight-lipped smile, showing me how painful the memory was for her. I reached across the table and placed my hand on her arm. I sympathetically murmured, I'm sorry, Lily, so very sorry, as she struggled to contain her tears. She said, "Thank you," and inhaled once more. About 2 days later I lost the baby. I had to have an operation, otherwise I might have been in danger. I would like to think she was a little girl, just like your Maddie, that she would have been full of life and just beautiful. She took out a tissue from her bag, wiped her eyes, and then, to my astonishment, gave me a new one. After grabbing the tissue, I noticed that my eyes were also moist. After we were all comfortable, Lily went on. I noticed Shona glancing at us from the corner of my eye, but she was preoccupied with Rick and the children. Anyway, Lily recommenced. I became very depressed after losing my little one. They have me on antidepressants as well as a few hormone treatments, most of which I have finished now. But as I'm sure you've noticed, I can be a little brash now and then. I chuckled, and Lily joined in, saying she didn't mind and that I should be okay with a little humor. I tried to be lighthearted when I asked, "And let me guess, you picked up smoking after several years, just as a coping mechanism?" Lily nodded and grinned. She seemed to finish her story when she stated, "My girlfriends and I smoked through university. I know it's a filthy habit, but it takes my mind off things." I said, "Lily, would you mind if I gave you a hug?" She stared at me, so I pretended not to know. Please don't get me wrong, but I am assuming neither the police or the surgeon, who know the full story, would be able to give you a hug. Dismissing the scowl, Lily got up and moved around the table, reaching out her hands in the manner that Maddie does when she needs comfort from her parents. She was as stiff as a board when I put my arms around her and pushed her toward me, but after a little while, she softened and yanked into me like damn walls shattered. Lily let out a loud cry and sobbed onto my chest. Rick and Shona were watching the pool when I turned to look at it. Rick in particular was wearing a frown. I gave a small shake of my head, and Shona took hold of Rick's arm, luring him away to play with the kids and divert their attention. I led Lily into a separate lounge from the others. After we sat down, Lily remained crying while holding my arms with her hands and keeping her head buried in my breast. She never once looked up. I didn't know quite what to do, so I just held her in my arms like I would a distressed kid, without saying anything. About 10 minutes later, Rick and Shona helped the kids get out of the pool and inside. I grinned at them as they tried to move by us silently, but Shona gave me another suspicious look as she passed, so I mouthed the word Kleenex to her. Shona returned a little while later carrying a pitcher of water with 2 glasses and a box of tissues. She laid them down and went back inside. Lily must have been relieved of her mental discomfort by the activities because she turned to look at the water and tissues first, then at me. The mascara she had been wearing earlier had run horribly, and her eyes were swollen. After wiping away her tears with a tissue, I poured her a tiny glass of water and gave it to her. I said, "This way." After sipping the water silently, she re-entered my arms. I inquired, "Are you all right?" Lily nodded after shaking her head and looking up at me. "Yes, thank you. I didn't know that I needed that." I grinned. "It's all good. When I divorced Bridget, Shona did something very similar. I most likely had worse makeup runs than you do." Lily asked me, "She really is special to you?" "Shona, I mean," while laughing and glancing at the tissue in her hands. "She's my best friend, always has been. Shona and I have been through hell and back together. Anytime I have truly needed her, she's been there for me," I responded. Lily inquired, "Even in your divorce?" I could tell she was attempting to regain equilibrium by inquiring about my relationships. I replied, "Even then. Sure, there was a lot of yelling, and while we got Maddie out of the deal, we never should have married. But in the middle of it all, I realized I was better with her than without her. Just not married to her." Lily inquired, "What about your other wife, Bridget?" I breathed deeply. I hate to admit it, but I married Bridget on the rebound. Not my smartest move, and if I had looked at things clearly, I never would have done it. Bridget was cheating on me for quite some time. I loved her, or thought it was love, but all the evidence I gathered showed she never loved me. I was just a meal ticket. Lily was staring at me. "I'm sorry to hear that, Tim. Despite the impression of a first-class garbage I gave you at our first meeting, you come across as a lovely man. Bridget was an idiot. Any girl would be lucky to have you." With an eyebrow lift, I inquired, "Any girl?" "Yeah, if only I could be so," Lily nodded. She didn't finish the statement since I took it straight away. I kissed her, pressing my lips to hers. Her eyes widened for a brief minute before closing, and I felt this beautiful, hurt, and angry lady melt into me once more. But this time, the motivation was attraction rather than comfort. We both grinned as we withdrew, and Lily took hold of my hand. "That was unexpected," she remarked, grinning at me. She noticed that I scowled. She corrected herself hastily, but not unwelcome. Saying it again, "This is the way I spoke." Lily laughed. Lily and I spoke for an hour while the sun descended from the sky. We both delved more into the hurt from our previous relationships. She informed me that her ex was incarcerated. Rick arrived with a piece of Mama's pizza after Shona and the children had left by the time the sun had fallen and the lights had come on. Baked in an authentic wood-fired oven, this pizza features fresh mozzarella, fresh basil, and a handmade Italian sauce that's served hot and fresh. For a few minutes, the conversation was a little heated, but Lily skillfully let Shona and Rick know that we had been discussing some pains from our past. Although she never provided specifics, she told Shona enough of the story to seem to satisfy her curiosity. I knew later that Shona would question me. We all went inside after supper this week. Shona and Rick were bringing Greg and Lily home with them, and Maddie was with me. I hugged Lily awkwardly, but there was a touch of fondness in the hug that neither Rick nor Shona missed. Maddie informed me that she hadn't missed it either as we got ready for bed. "Dad," my daughter said in a way that made it clear she wanted to have a serious conversation with me. While she was brushing her hair, I took a seat on the end of her bed. My astute daughter asked me, "You like her, don't you?" "I think so, Maddie. She's been through a lot. In some ways more than what we went through. But we've only known her a couple of days. Let's give it some time. We don't want another Bridget on our hands, do we?" I scowled at Maddie's terminology. She perked up. "I don't think Lily is anything like that woman." "Sorry, Dad, I meant that unworthy woman." Maddie was growing up quickly, and I couldn't help but giggle at how soon guys would come around and take over our life. Maddie and I exchanged a smile and said, "It's okay, Maddie. Bridget was a trash woman. But just watch your words, please. And Lily, who knows? But what do you think?" While dragging her brush through her dark blonde hair, Maddie nibbled her bottom lip for a moment. "You're right, Dad. She's not like Bridget, and Mom and I were watching you two this afternoon." I smirked and said, "Oh, you were you?" To a blushing Maddie. "She likes you, Dad, a lot if Mom and I are right. Just be sure, Dad, I don't get the weird vibe I got from Bridget, but she's also damaged. We can all see that." "That she is. She has dealt with a lot these last few years, and none of it her fault," I said to my daughter. "Like what?" inquired Maddie. "I can't tell you, Pumpkin. Lily told me in confidence, and I won't betray that." I was expecting Maddie to disagree with me, but she just nodded curtly. After that, we talked about school and homework, doing what parents usually do, which is to encourage their children to be prepared for the upcoming school week. Later, Shona called as I was sitting down in my study, going through emails and making plans for the coming week. It felt like Shona was scolding me. "I don't know what you said or did, but that woman is totally besotted with you," Shona said. I said, "Well, hello to you too," as I turned to face my Bluetooth headset and pulled up our next month's software sprint calendar. I began transferring tasks around the board so that our development teams could review them the following week while Shona was speaking. Shona said to me, "I'm serious, Tim," in a tone befitting a criminal. "Lily has done nothing but talk about how awesome you are all the way home and right up until now when I called you. Rick tells me he has never seen her so devoted. Apparently, her old boyfriend was abusive and it didn't end well." "It didn't," I mutely affirmed. The other end of the line paused, and I could hear Shona shifting gears in her head. "She asked me, she told you all about it, didn't she?" "Yes, she did," I verified. "Shona, Maddie asked me about it earlier, and I'll tell you the same thing as I told her. That woman has been through things that make our issues seem small and insignificant in comparison. But she also told them to me in confidence, and while you're my best friend and I love you, I cannot say anything more." I kept staring at the sprint boards in front of me, and Shona remained silent once more. After a minute, she said simply, "So, you like her too?" I looked away from the boards and out the window of my study. Little could be seen outside due to the darkness, though you could see passing container ships in the distance. Their pilot lights were visible as they rocked gently back and forth. Shona laughed as I said, "Yeah, I like her. She's articulate, witty, like sci-fi, doesn't mind I'm a geek. And don't forget drop-dead gorgeous," Shona concluded. "I didn't realize," I remarked, attempting to hide my laughter. For a minute, we both laughed and made fun of one another. "Really, Tim?" Shona asked, settling back into the pertinent discussion. "She likes you a little more than just a passing flirt. In between talking about you, she's been questioning me a lot about our relationship, as well as Maddie. She's a little worried about you and me though." I chuckled. "She shouldn't be, if there is really something there, and between talking with Lily this afternoon, Maddie earlier, and now you, I'm starting to hope there is going to be life after Bridget." "There will be, Tim," Shona remarked gravely. I could feel Shona arching her eyebrow. "Are you okay if I go to bat for you? As your first love and your best friend, I've got unique insights to either sell or scare." Lily was everything we had discussed before, and more, I thought to myself. I caught a glimpse of a stunning woman who was terrified that everyone was trying to harm her. There was never going to be a problem with loyalty, but love. "Yes, Shona," I answered. "Not sure if it will go anywhere, but go for it." After that, I didn't hear from Lily or Shona for 3 days. Maddie also seemed unusually silent and gave me looks throughout dinner that suggested something was wrong. Me, I just let the nerd take over and immerse myself in my job. On a Wednesday night, after returning from work, I saw Maddie, Lily, and Shona seated in my living room. Lily and Shona had each had a glass of wine, and from the kitchen I could smell something like bacon and the unique, mouth-watering scent of carbonara. After Maddie went to bed, I said hello to the women and excused myself for a short while. I then went into my office and organized my work schedule for the evening. I figured I would play it calm since I had no idea where Lily was heading. "Tim," Lily uttered as she entered my office, "dinner will be on the..." She paused to survey the space. Her eyes widened as she took in the computer system, which had an amazing multi-screen configuration. However, unless you were an expert in computer hardware, it was just what you would anticipate from a nerd like myself. But it was the walls, frames, and posters that had drawn her eye. Lily strolled up and studied the trophies and posters on the wall next to it for almost 2 minutes. The fact that I had an image for every game that had been a hit and a frame next to it for every award it had taken home was quite amazing. I must admit that seeing all I had worked so hard to create at Other Gaming made me feel a little proud of myself. The prizes were framed and hung on the wall in my workplace, but I preferred to have my own games here, in my own area. Lily pointed to a billboard and remarked, "I know this game." She looked at another poster and said, "I ended up spending several $100s to buy the bonus packs. It was a good game. This one too, the hours I spent trying to level up." She then showed me that she had the game by taking out her phone and looking at another one. This one got me through that time in the hospital. I loved the puzzles. When things were darkest, I retreated into these games. Why do you have them on your wall, Tim? I know you work in programming. Do you work for the people that create these games? Tell me what game she's talking about. Open puzzle build and look in the bottom right of the loading screen, was my question in return. She asked, "Other Gaming, that's you?" As her eyes widened. I said, "Years ago I created Other Gaming, and all these games are my creation." With wide eyes and a tone that betrayed her amazement, she questioned, "You mean you design them, you own the company, these games?" I said with a laugh, "Since I was 19. So, when you told me that Bridget was a gold digger?" she inquired. I chuckled, "Yeah, I'm worth a little bit more than most, but honestly, most of it is tied up in the business." "Okay," she responded with a tiny smile on her face. "I just came to let you know that dinner is ready." Dinner was delicious. Lily used my kitchen to make a fantastic fettuccine carbonara, grilled garlic bread, and vanilla bean ice cream after Maddie and Shona had let her in. Everyone was full to the brim by the time the supper was over. Shona had his eye on Lily, but despite the flattering words that Shona, Maddie, and I were saying, Lily was surprisingly depressed. After that, Shona accompanied Maddie to assist her get ready for bed while obliquely suggesting that I speak with Lily. I poured each of us a tiny glass of a delicious desert wine from the area. It was sweet and left a mellow aftertaste on the tongue, making it the ideal drink after ice cream. I went into the lounge with Lily and we sat down. "Are you all right, Lily? That was an amazing dinner, but if you don't mind me saying, you didn't appear to enjoy it as much. Did we do something to offend you?" I responded. "No," Lily responded right away. She sighed and kind of slumped against the couch, deflating a little. "No, it was, she said. "Tim," Lily uttered softly, her voice carrying a hint of resignation. "Have you ever been in a situation where you thought you would at last be able to rise above the BS, that you might at last be able to find something worth holding on to, but then in one moment of clarity you figure out that it's never going to happen? The gulf is too wide to cross." I looked at Lily for a minute, not really understanding what she was talking about. However, I assumed it was related to our thoughtful discussions of her history. I took a taste of my wine. I suppose, in some ways my breakup with Bridget was like that. I did love her, and when I learned the truth, it broke something inside me, something that still feels empty. But I can't figure out how to fix it, but I know I need to. That is my ravine I'm trying to cross. Does that count? I replied. "I think in some ways it does," Lily replied, turning to face me. "Tim, you're my ravine." Her sidelong glance told me that my laughter was not the appropriate response. "Sorry, I don't get it. How am I that gulf, that gap to you?" Lily blushed a little and smiled, pushing a lock of hair back over her ear. "Tim, I think we both know there is something between us. I mean that kiss." I grinned as well and said, "It was pretty awesome." She smiled for a brief period before losing the smile and falling into sadness. "For the past week, we've hung out. I've gotten to know Shona and Maddie. I've gotten looked after by Rick. I've gotten to know you, the man who had kids at his birthday party pushed me into the pool just because I wanted a smoke," she said with a grin on her face. I smiled at Lily once more and placed my hand on hers. "And that kiss? Oh my goodness, Tim, that kiss, I have never felt like that from just a simple kiss." I looked at her in confusion as she dismissed it. "But tonight, I saw in your study that you're a gap I can't bridge. I can't be that," she said. Confused, I asked, "Be what?" Lily stared at me, tears in her eyes as it felt like her heart was breaking. "Tim, I'm nothing. I work in admin for local council. I'm from nowhere and I can't hold a candle to the social circles you walk in." Lily was about to cry, saying, "I'm broke. I make a little under $60,000 a year, and I can't. I won't be a gold digger." This woman was pouring her heart out, feeling that with my money, I would think she was a gold digger, much like Bridget. But sometimes I am just thick. For some reason, even before she knew anything, she opened up to me. She had been abused, she had lost a child, and she was angry. Suddenly, I knew what needed to be done. I got up and said, "Lily, come with me." I took her hand and led her out the back. Walking hand in hand down the path out back, her fingers firmly wrapped around mine, I could sense hope radiating from her. We started walking along the pool under a full moon, with no lights on. Abruptly, I lifted her up, clung to her, and sprang, falling in the water with both of us fully clothed. I took a step back and met her gaze. "Lily, I don't care about your background. I don't care that you're broken. To me, you're not nothing. You're beautiful, talented. You cared enough tonight to make an amazing meal. Before you walked into my office, I am guessing Shona and my daughter had seen that you liked me and were encouraging you to chase after me, right?" With her arms still around my neck, she nodded. Lily, if either Shona or Maddie thought you were, as you say, a gold digger, then you would not have gotten anywhere near me tonight, let alone had the opportunities to talk with me this week. Trust me, they don't think you're nobody. If you will let me, I'd be more than happy to date you and we can see where this goes. Lily again kissed me. Okay, Mr. Other, but only if you promise to stop throwing me into pools anytime you think you need my attention. Sorry, but that's a no deal, I chuckled. With a smile on her face, Shona said, if you two need them, I'm leaving a few towels here for you. Maddie is in bed and will turn her light out in a few. She's going to leave you both alone and I'm heading home. After that, she moved to the edge and took a seat on a chaise lounge. Lily was smiling at me, her arms encircling my neck, declaring with a fierce gaze, I love him, Lily, Shona said. Lily. He deserves to be loved for the amazing man he is. He will always have Maddie, Rick, and me. But he needs a partner, someone he can hand his soul to and who will handle it with care and respect. I think you could be that person, Lily. I love him like the brother I never got. There is no one more important to me in the world than the man you have in your arms right now. So, I will tell you this once and once only. Treat him right and never take advantage of him. However, I will stop at nothing to keep him safe from you if you injure him. It's only now that Bridget is starting to realize that. If you treat Tim well, you won't ever need to worry. After saying that, Shona stood up and left. With a playful twinkle in her eye, she stopped 6 steps from the rear door and said, Lily, watch out for Tim's tongue. He uses it rather skillfully. Better than Rick, in fact, she said, and I blushed a little. Good night, you two. We're going to do dinner out tomorrow night. See you then. As Shona went inside, Lily turned to face me and held me. What did she mean? As we floated in the pool with our arms wrapped around one another, I said to Lily, Shona has a very defensive streak when it comes to those she cares about. She never really liked Bridget, but she tolerated her for my sake. I have no doubt that we will learn of any actions she may have taken. By moonlight, I glanced at Lily. However, you have watched a lot of ladies attempt over the past year, and many of them never even received a date, so trust me when I say you have her blessing to pursue me. Maddie and Shona appear to be capable of solving the problem. We went to the shallow end of the pool and continued kissing. So, you were talking about clothes before we were interrupted. Lily and I enjoyed ourselves carefully over the following few minutes. Her voice was raspy and desperate as she begged, please, please, inside me now. Lily retreated a little and I saw her spread her legs and lie back in the shallow water. Suddenly, I was inside her, pushing my way through her warm womanhood and feeling her squeezing my insides. Our brief encounter ended with me feeling a release that I couldn't stop. Tim, I said as I leaped straight into her arms and kissed her, shocking her. It's okay, I don't mind, I laughed. If you're gracious enough to let me repay the favor later, that is. You say you would, correct? That is to say, would you devour me alive? Her eyes widened. What, you've never been rejected by a guy? Lily nodded. I have been with a total of 3 guys, including you just now in my life, and if I suggested that to either of the previous 2, well, it would not have ended well for me. I laughed. Then let's get that rectified, shall we? You're coming to my room right now. That's when I pulled Lily out of the water, and we wrapped up in towels and went to gather up our soaking clothing, tossing them in the laundry. And I walked Lily up to my room, holding her hand as we went by Maddie's room and hearing her playfully say, Good night, Dad, good night, Lily. With a laugh, I bid Lily good night, and she said something similar, obviously ashamed. I go to my room, shut the door, and lock it. Truly, Lily was a redhead. I showed her what Shona meant before and then brought her to my king-size bed. I adore your swimming pool, she remarked, her voice full of admiration. We both fell asleep after I kissed her. The following month was magical. Lily moved in practically overnight. It was a little whirlwind, and we made it a point to go on dates, spend time out and about, and then come home and play like fools all night long. Nadine would often chastise me for missing our morning stand-up, but I think she knew something because she would always have a smile on her face. For her part, Lily applied for and was hired by the local government to do administrative work, just as she had done up in Kingscliff. She found that her fear of not fitting in with our social circles was unwarranted because, as a nerd, I made an effort to avoid the glitz and glamour as much as possible. It had been months since that first night in the pool, and Lily worried if I wasn't in bed by midnight, which being a geek, happened often. Traveling and not being in our bed brought back memories of being alone. Eventually, I arranged for her to take a day off and brought her to Sydney with me. I did my meetings, and she did an amazing job of charming one of my board members as my girlfriend. That was the first time I had to travel, just an overnight trip to Sydney. Lily nearly passed out. We exchanged I love yous during the 3rd month, after she'd pushed me into the pool before supper, and it seemed like getting into the pool would be a recurring theme in our relationship. When I proposed to Maddie and Shona a year later, I don't think I had ever seen them happier. Our backyard wedding took place on a Saturday afternoon. Rick was my best man and Shona was my maid of honor. The photographer was prepared when we said our vows and our celebrant announced that we could kiss the bride. Rick and Shona turned to face each other and, you guessed it, pushed us into the swimming pool. We spent over a month traveling and sightseeing throughout numerous countries during our honeymoon in Europe, and the photos turned out brilliantly, capturing the smile on our cheeks as we dropped arm in arm, into the ocean. Lily and I discovered that we were a great match. Sure, we had our arguments, but we also worked things out after our feelings were satisfied. I also discovered that she was incredibly envious of me, and that the only women who could speak with me without incurring her wrath were Shona, Maddie, and Nadine. Everyone else would instantly face a fiery redhead. 2 incidents around our first wedding anniversary put any doubts I had about faithfulness being a problem after my 2 prior marriages to rest. One of the rare occasions when Shona and Lily went out on a girls' night out was the first one. They went to a local club with a number of women, some of whom were married and some of whom were single. The women would all dance together, and although the single guys would frequently ask them to dance, neither Shona nor Lily would dance with a man. It was 2 nights following everything that Shona told me about. She was telling me, "Seriously, Tim, you can't blame Lily, it's not her fault," as Lily was speaking with our attorney on the phone. Security told me these 2 males started hitting on her as soon as I left the bathroom for a short while. One of them attempted to drag her out of the pub in front of the 2 women who were still at the table with her when they refused to accept no. Lily let the guy get her up, then pushed him down and kicked him in the nuts. The second guy then grabbed Lily and she elbowed him in the stomach. And as he went down, she used her handbag to knock him in the side of the head, screaming over and over again that she was a married woman and her body belonged only to her husband. They could both take a hike and burn in hell. That sort of thing, she told me. Shona had an expression of glee on her face. When the club's security tape was played in court, the charges were dropped, and the 2 men received a 6-month suspended sentence along with a warning to learn that no is never okay. About a month after our first wedding anniversary, the second event happened, during which we camped on the beach at Fraser Island in Queensland. After that week, I could see why the locals called us white pointers, because Lily hardly ever wore a top while we played in the surf. But I'm getting off topic. The second occurrence took place around 1 month later. Bridget came to visit Lily. Lily didn't realize anything was wrong for approximately 60 seconds since I hadn't shown her a picture of Bridget or given her a detailed description. However, while we relaxed by the pool that afternoon, she informed me about the meeting. Maddie and Greg were swimming back and forth, having fun with some pool toys, while Rick and Shona were seated across from us. I wasn't expecting it. I just had a meeting booked with a B. Brown. When she walked in and sat down, I greeted her politely, but she just stared at me, Lily was naively telling us. My wife went on to tell us the story of how she met my ex-wife, saying, "I got really uncomfortable as she looked at me, but as with her reputation as a bad woman, Bridget didn't disappoint. Lily was told by the woman, 'I can see why he likes you, you're much better looking than he described.'" At that, Lily flushed, intuitively sensing that she was talking about me. "Thank you, Ms. Brown, I like to think my husband Tim finds me attractive," Lily replied. The woman in front of her scowled at that, then grinned, though not in a pleasant way. The woman corrected herself, saying, "Oh, I was meaning Aaron, not Tim." Lily exhaled sharply and asked, "WH, why would you mention Aaron? How do you know him?" She was suddenly curious about this woman's identity. The woman's sly smirk spread across her face. With an evil smile, the woman told my wife, "Oh, Aaron and I know a lot about you. We've been tracking you for some time. After he got out of prison, I sought him out to get him to take you back." Lily was agitated since she was still struggling with Aaron's history. "Why would you do that? I am married now," my wife said to the woman, blushing a little. "You're in my space, little miss pretty red-haired woman," the woman growled, losing all pretense of politeness. "Your spot?" Lily asked, becoming slightly shaky. The lady rose up. "Yeah, my spot. I was Mrs. Other before you and I want my husband back." Panic gave way to rage in Lily's thinking, and this awareness helped her to focus. Lily was suddenly unconcerned about Aaron since she was staring at the lady who had brought her husband so much suffering. "Bridget," was all she said. Bridget nodded and said, "I'll win him back even though I messed up the first time. Tim is her husband. He was infatuated with this body, and I'm not crazy." Lily briefly believed she was going to leap across the table and choke Bridget. Aaron had obviously told her a few things, but my wife just barely refrained. She stood up from the table, took her luggage, and left without saying anything. But Bridget had other ideas. She grabbed Lily by the back of her hair as she was leaving the building. "You're going to leave Tim and go back to Aaron. I'm not done with you," Bridget began shrieking in front of everyone in the cafe as she pulled Lily back towards the table. "I plan to reconcile with Tim and bear his children, ensuring that Tim and his wealth will always belong to me." Then, not seeing the left hook coming, Bridget went to grab Lily's arm and spin her around to face her. My gorgeous red-headed wife used the momentum to catch Bridget off guard, and her closed fist struck the other woman's face, stabbing Bridget and causing her to release her hold on Lily's hair. Lily then swiftly followed suit, tripping Bridget and pinning one of her arms behind her back. Lily called out to the witnesses in the cafe, "Someone call the police," to which one of them replied that they had already done so. Then my wife described how she kept Bridget face down, arm pinned, and now Lily's knee in the middle of her back while leaning in close to whisper to her, saying, "Listen up, whore. There's no poaching that man, you had your opportunity." At the mention of Shona, Bridget, already suffering, sagged against the ground and said, "You should know that Shona would make sure your body was never found if you tried." And you know, I'd have no problems helping her dig the hole. But I belong to him, Bridget, not the other way around. Oh, and as for kids, don't worry, I was going to tell him tonight, but I suppose you can be the first to know, but Tim is going to be a father again. I just confirmed this morning with the doctors that I am pregnant. And knowing how well Tim gets that beautiful baby batter up inside me, I wouldn't be surprised if it was twins. Following that, the police arrived, and Bridget was taken into custody without delay. Lily was questioned, but it was pointed out by all that Lily had simply detained Bridget and acted in self-defense. Lily apologized to me as she was wrapping up the story for telling Bridget before telling me she was pregnant. I assured her, laughing, that it was okay, that it had hurt Bridget a lot, and that I was simply relieved that my wife and the children were doing okay. The following day, Bridget was freed and given a restraining order against me, Lily, Maddie, Shona, Rick, and Greg. Although we didn't see her again, we did hear a few years later that she had wed a drug lord on the Gold Coast. It didn't last long, as she was arrested along with her spouse and several other individuals who were sentenced to prison. We also learned that Lily was actually carrying triplets rather than twins. Lily went into labor at 3 in the morning on a Wednesday. Less than 2 hours later, Connor, Adam, and their sister Jessie were all delivered via cesarean section. The triplets' health was too important for the physicians to jeopardize. I spent the entire time in the operation room with Lily on the other side of the curtain. I loved my wife even more because she was a trooper. Together with a full-time live-in nanny, a nosy sister named Maddie, Shona, Rick, and even a much older Greg, I took a 3-month leave of absence from other gaming to assist. Finding a routine took some time because Lily was nursing nearly all the time. She was in constant demand because she had 3 hungry babies. I used to change diapers, and I didn't realize how awful those first ones were. Add 3 of those, and the house smelled a little odd for a few years. But we persevered, and though we were exhausted, Lily and I had a few fights. Before I cooled down, I believe I simply left and went to Shona and Rick's house. However, we reconnected, and I must admit that the bonding over makeup that evening after the kids went to bed was very unforgettable. Here we are, 3-year-old triplets, enjoying our typical Saturday afternoon by the pool at our house. 15 minutes ago, I had thrown Lily into the pool because she had made a crude remark about how William Riker in Star Trek always seems to pick up ladies, so maybe I could do the same and pick her up more often. After dropping her into the water, I did. In response, she grabbed me and smiled broadly, bringing me in with her as we laughed and shared a kiss. The whole family was playing in the pool a short while later, since the youngsters thought it was fantastic. After a short while, Shona, Rick, Lily, and I went outside and took a seat. Without Shona, I would not have survived everything. She remains my best friend. After a few years, Rick was unaware of Lily's past until we had a conversation about it with Lily and Shona. This revelation brought the 4 of us even closer. So as the kids played on a quiet Saturday afternoon, Shona pulled out a deck of cards. The grown-ups started working on important matters. Shona whispered in my ear, bending down, "She's cheating on you," as the 2 of us watched Lily from across the table. The last time Shona said those words, my world nearly ended, so for a split second, I was on the verge of terror. This time, though, I grinned. I returned the whisper, "I know," and Lily grinned at me. I looked over my shoulder to the large mirror doors that reflected the image of the cards I was holding, at just the right angle for my spouse to see what I was holding. "Shona, he knows what's best for him," Lily smirked and put down her next card. She gave me a knowing smile and said, "He knows that if I win now, then he wins later." In response to your query, I can say that I did, in fact, win later, twice, but that's a tale for another day. My comment: okay, listen up all who are about to be married. I overheard my grandmother one time talking to her daughters at a family holiday dinner. She said if the person you are about to marry is not your best friend, then you have no business getting married. Meaning if you cannot tell the person who you are about to marry what you can tell your best guy friend or best girlfriend, then do not get married.